No one in Dallas imagined that a 10-year-old girl could shake so much just hearing the name of her own dance teacher. Emily counted more than a dozen tremors in less than 5 minutes as she watched hidden, heartbroken, from the narrow hallway of her neighborhood studio. Lily's face was completely colorless, her lips quivering, her eyes lost in the waxed floor, as if that place, which should be cheerful, had turned into something unbelievable and deeply disturbing. "Mom, please don't make me go back there," the girl whispered later, her voice cracking as if carrying a secret too heavy for her age. When Emily finally plucked up the courage to open the door to the dark studio and see what the teacher did to the girls when their parents weren't around, what she discovered was so shocking that it forever changed the way she saw trust, security, and hidden truth within a classroom. But to understand how Emily got to this point of despair and fear, holding the doorknob with a trembling hand, you have to go back a few weeks to a period that seemed completely normal. Emily was 42 years old and lived in Dallas, Texas, in a simple residential neighborhood with brick houses, manicured lawns, and children playing on the sidewalk in the late afternoon. She worked in a hospital in the city, in the administrative area, facing long shifts, reports, and constant calls, but always finding a way to get home in time to follow her daughter's routine. Divorced for a few years, she had learned to fend for herself, to think about bills, schedules, and security, without ever letting Lily realize the weight of it all. Lily, 10 years old, was the ray of light in the house. Small, with brown hair tied almost always in an awkward ponytail, she had an easy smile and a delicate way of walking around the room, as if she were always about to dance. Since she was a little girl, she improvised steps in the narrow corridor of the apartment, climbed on the couch to spin, wore her mother's old t-shirts as full skirts. Emily, seeing this glow, always dreamed of giving her daughter something extra, an activity that would combine discipline, joy, and a chance to express herself. When she heard about a dance school in Plano, a neighboring city, well recommended by other mothers, she felt that perhaps she had found the right place. The Miller Dance Studio was in a small commercial area, surrounded by a bakery, an old barbershop, and a cell phone repair shop. The studio was known in the region for preparing girls for performances at schools, churches, and local events. The head teacher, Jason Miller, was a man of about 35 years old, always smiling, very polite to his parents, and extremely affectionate to the children, at least at first glance. Mothers spoke of him with admiration, commented on the talent, care, and patience he showed in each rehearsal. For many families, Jason had become almost a trusted figure, someone to whom they handed their daughters without fear. At first, Lily was overjoyed with the idea of the classes. He carefully chose the pink leotard, the thin socks, and the first sneakers, which Emily bought with effort, but also with pride. The girl talked about pirouettes, pliés, spins, and dreams of one day going up on a big stage. Emily felt a mixture of joy and relief to see that despite all the challenges, she was able to give her daughter a childhood that seemed safe and full of possibilities. On the first days of school, the atmosphere seemed one of pure normality. Mothers greeted each other in the parking lot, exchanged quick words about the weather, about school, about Dallas traffic. The interior of the studio had light walls, full of posters of old performances, photos of smiling classes on illuminated stages. Jason was always at the reception when the children arrived, calling each one by name, bending down to be at their height, praising the hair tie, the effort, the excitement. When Emily walked Lily to the door of the Hall of Mirrors for the first time, she saw the teacher gently correct a student's posture, placing his hand on her back, guiding the movement of her arms. It seemed just a technical, professional gesture. Even so, for a brief second, a light squeeze passed through Emily's chest as she saw the door closed completely, without any cracks. She looked around and noticed that the other mothers seemed calm, some already returning to the car, others solving things on their cell phones, as if nothing there could represent any danger. At the end of that first lesson, Emily waited in the parking lot, with the car running and the radio down. When Lily walked out the studio door, she came walking fast, her face a little red and her hair stuck to her forehead from sweat. Her little hands were cold when she opened the car door, but the girl soon smiled, saying that the class had been tiring but very fun. Emily decided not to pay attention to the detail of the cold hands, telling herself that it was just the effect of physical exertion and the strong air conditioning of the studio. Gradually, this routine of apparent tranquility and normality was established. Emily drove Lily twice a week in the afternoon to Plano, driving down the same road, past the same intersections, seeing the same American flags on the porches, and the kids leaving public school with heavy backpacks. On the way, they talked about the day, about homework, about small things. Lily talked about her new dancing friend, a girl named Chloe, who made jokes all the time, and another named Madison, who was more serious, but danced very well. But as the weeks passed, Emily began to notice small details that, at first, she almost pushed under the rug of her mind. Lily kept going to class, still wearing her leotard and flats, but something in the sparkle in her eyes seemed to have changed. When she talked about the group exercises, the girl even smiled, describing the music, the steps, the corrections in front of the mirror. But whenever Emily asked about the end of class, about the minutes after most of the girls left, Lily would shut up, change the subject, or answer vaguely. The so-called extra training with Jason began to appear more frequently in the conversation of other mothers. Some proudly said that their daughters were the chosen ones to stay a little longer, to receive special attention, because they were doing very well. They saw it as a sign of talent. Emily, on the outside, smiled, nodded, trying to convince herself that this was good, that Lily being called to stay was also a compliment, but inside, a stubborn voice whispered that something there didn't fit. Lily began to come home a little quieter. Instead of running to the room putting on music to dance, she preferred to go straight to take a shower and lock herself in the bathroom for a few more minutes. At the dinner table, Emily noticed that her daughter was moving the food, scattered, as if her head was far away. Instead of telling lively details of the class, he spoke little, let out a "it was normal" or "it was tiring." The mother tried to bring up the subject, asked about Jason, about her friends, about the news. But Lily seemed to measure every word. One night, after one of these classes, Emily saw something that was recorded as the first clear sign that something was wrong. They were in the kitchen, eating a simple noodle she had prepared, when Lily's cell phone, left on the table, beeped with a notification. It was the warning tone of the group of students in the studio. At the same moment, the girl dropped her fork into the plate, making the sauce splatter. Her hands began to tremble visibly, and her eyes filled with contained panic. Emily, trying to act calmly, asked if everything was okay, if it was just some silly message from her friends. Lily took a deep breath, swallowed hard and said yes, that it was just a joke, that she was tired. But the way she looked away, the way she hurried her phone into her room and stuffed it into her backpack, set off an alarm bell inside Emily. From then on, the mother started to pay attention to everything more carefully. She noticed that Lily started to wear baggy pants or shorts over the leotard, even on hot days, saying that she was ashamed of her legs. She noticed that the girl insisted that she arrive a little earlier at the studio, always repeating that she did not want to wait alone in the locker room. Emily began to ask, tactfully, what happened in those final minutes after most of the girls left. Lily replied that Jason gave us special training, which helped with the choreography, but her expression never matched the idea of something fun. In parallel to all this, Jason's messages in the group of mothers remained friendly, full of praise for the classes, announcements of a possible performance in a theater in the region, plans for extra rehearsals for those who wanted it. He was helpful, answered questions, praised the girls publicly. To those who saw it from the outside, he seemed like a dedicated teacher, almost a protector of those children. This public image further confused Emily, who felt torn between what her eyes saw as normality and what her heart felt as alert. One afternoon, as she drove home from work through the wide streets of Dallas, Emily had a thought that she couldn't shake. What if those tremors, those silences, and those pleas to get there earlier were actually calls for help? From that moment on, the maternal instinct began to scream inside her with a force that could no longer be ignored. The doubt, once small, turned into a constant weight on the chest, accompanying every outing to the studio, every message in the group, every look away from Lily. Emily knew that many people would call it an exaggeration, that perhaps other mothers would say that it was just nervous presentation or shyness. But her heart, that quiet place that had so often guided her through difficult decisions, told her that there was something wrong behind that closed door, something no one else seemed willing to see. And even without knowing how, she began to prepare herself to discover the truth, no matter how painful it was. Emily had spent the previous night almost without shutting her eyes. The image of the purple on Lily's thigh, of the trembling hands holding the towel, and of that flimsy excuse about a fall in the spin came back to mind like a movie she couldn't stop. The thought that he had taken too long to act tightened his chest. She got up before sunrise, went to the kitchen in silence, and stood for a few minutes, looking at the screen of her cell phone on the table, as if the device was now a kind of weapon and, at the same time, the only witness who could help her prove what she felt. He sat down, took a deep breath, and began to fiddle with the device's settings. She checked the battery, put it to charge until it was completely full, tested the audio recorder, pressing the button, speaking quietly, listening to herself repeat a simple phrase just to make sure her voice came out clear. He deleted the tests, started again, checked the volume. He opened the app again and left the separate icon on the home screen within a touch of a button. For the first time in a long time, he felt that he needed to transform his own distrust into something concrete. Intuition was no longer enough. She needed proof. Before leaving for work, he walked through the living room and down the hallway as if he were inside that studio. He counted steps to Lily's bedroom door, imagining the long hallway of Miller Dance Studio, the point on the wall where he had leaned against the other time, all very clear in his memory. He mentally reviewed the path from the front desk to the Hall of Mirrors, the side door spot he had seen an employee use once. Every detail was now part of a plan. I was afraid, but along with it came a firm, almost hard determination, the likes of which I hadn't felt since the divorce. When she called Lily to get ready for school and later for dance class, she tried to act as naturally as possible. She watched her daughter put on her leotards, pull her baggy pants over it, straighten her hair in a tighter ponytail than usual. Lily's face looked tired, but she didn't complain of sleep or pain. She just moved on automatic, as if she was preparing for something she had already accepted as part of the routine, even though she didn't like it. On the way to the studio, Emily kept her voice calm. He talked about simple things, asked about the math test, commented on the weather, the sultry heat of Dallas that late afternoon. Lily answered, but without that brightness she used to have when talking about dance. At one point, the girl asked, almost as if she didn't want anything, if her mother was going to be waiting in the car as usual, or if she had something to do later. Emily swallowed the lump in her throat and replied that she might need to stop by the supermarket, that the pantry was getting empty, but that she would be back in time to pick it up. Inside, he felt guilt bump into the decision. I need to do this for you, she thought, looking quickly sideways at her daughter's face. When he parked in front of the Miller Dance Studio, the movement seemed the usual. Cars stopping, mothers and fathers opening doors, girls getting out with backpacks, laughter. The facade is clean, the sign with the name in large letters, the light curtains on the reception window. Nothing there, for those who arrived now, seemed to hide anything. Emily accompanied Lily to the door as usual. Jason was at the reception, smiling, greeting the students, thanking them for their presence. He called Lily by name, praised her posture, said something about the upcoming performance and how the special girls would play an important role. Emily felt the expression catch on her face. He forced a smile, nodded, but the term special girls echoed in a strange way in his mind. She said goodbye to her daughter, gave her a kiss on the forehead, and waited to see her go with the other girls to the corridor that led to the Hall of Mirrors. Only after she was sure no one else was paying attention to her did she get in the car, turn around the block, and calmly walk to the back street, which she had used a few times. But she knew it led to the smaller service parking lot, where she had once seen employees enter through the side door. There, the surroundings were already different. Fewer cars, fewer people circulating. Garbage accumulated near a metal trash can, a light smell of food coming from a nearby restaurant. Emily parked the car facing the street, turned off the engine, but kept her hands on the wheel for a few seconds, taking a deep breath, trying to control her own heart, which seemed to be beating in her throat. He took his cell phone, checked once again if the recorder was ready, put it in the inside pocket of his jacket, and got out of the car, feeling the hot afternoon air hit his face. He walked through the parking lot with firm steps, even though his legs felt a little wobbly. The side door of the building, made of simple metal, was leaning against it, as if someone had forgotten to close it properly. Emily glanced quickly to the sides, making sure no one was watching her, and then pushed the door down slowly, just enough to get through. The hallway he found inside was narrow, with bare walls, the smell of cleaning products, and a slight hum of some old air conditioner. The sound of the music coming from the main room, further on, was muffled there, but you could still hear the rhythm marked. As he walked down that service corridor, mentally counting his steps, he felt his hand slip lightly on the cell phone inside his jacket. His body reacted with cold sweat, his mouth felt dry. At one point in the hallway, the music grew louder, and she realized she was right behind the wall of the Hall of Mirrors. He stopped, leaned back carefully, closed his eyes for a moment and thought, "If I'm wrong, that's okay. I apologize, I try to forget, I move on. But if I'm right, I won't forgive myself for taking so long." With that thought hammering, he pulled his cell phone out of his pocket, opened the recording app, made sure once again that the microphone was on, and pressed the button. The red icon appeared on the screen. Emily put the device back in her pocket, but so that the microphone was facing forward toward the top of her jacket, very close to the opening, hoping that it would pick it all up. From where I was, I could hear the music more clearly now. It was some well-known pop song, with a lively chorus, completely out of tune with the tension she felt inside. Between the breaks of the melody, Jason's voice emerged, strong, leading the group. He said phrases about posture, rhythm, breathing. At one point, Emily heard something that made her blood run cold. He called only 3 girls by name, including Lily, and said they were my special girls, that they would stay a little longer after class to work on an important part of the choreography. The expression, "my special girls," sounded this time almost like a veiled threat. Emily felt a shiver rise up her spine. He took a few more steps down the corridor until he found a small crack where the wall met the structure of the main door of the room. From there, she couldn't see the inside clearly, but she knew it was right next to the space where the girls danced. She leaned against the wall, held her breath for a few seconds, let her ears become the eyes she could not yet use. Time seemed to slow down. The music decreased in volume inside, as if someone had lowered the sound. Jason asked the whole class to make one last sequence. After that, she heard the sound of stronger footsteps, possibly the girls leaving the room, laughter, conversations. Soon after, his voice rose again, now lower, saying something like, "The others can go, but Lily, Chloe and Madison, stay a little longer. I need to see with you a detail that is only ours." Emily clasped her hands together, trying to control the urge to enter at that moment. The plan, however, was to first listen, record, be sure, and then act definitively. His chest hurt. She breathed short, almost without realizing it. Sweat ran down the back of the neck, despite the colder air inside the building. The corridor was cramped, and the feeling was that the walls were closing little by little. Inside, the sound of footsteps subsided. What could be heard now was the light creaking of the wooden floor, the sound of breathing, Jason's commands, which seemed more intimate, less formal. Emily remembered all the times she had doubted herself, all the warnings she had tried to explain away as nervous, embarrassed, tired. She thought about how blindly the other mothers trusted this man, and how this had made her for some time question her own sanity. But at that moment, with her cell phone recording and her whole body tense, she felt she couldn't back down. Then, she clearly heard his voice, asking the girls to turn off their cell phones. The tone was firm, but covered in a layer of false sweetness. He said that this was a special moment, that it could not be filmed because it would spoil the surprise, and that it was better that no one had the phone ringing so as not to disturb it. Emily felt her stomach turn. That order, which could seem normal to anyone, now sounded like a barrier raised on purpose to prevent outside eyes. Then he commented that what they would do there was only between us, that it was not something to talk about with their parents because they would not understand the artistic process and could be worried for nothing. With each word, Emily's distrust ceased to be just intuition and came dangerously close to certainty. She clenched her teeth, her nails digging into her own hands, while her heart gave a strong blow to her chest. Lily's voice then came down, softer, trembling, breaking the silence like a blade. She said she was cold. She didn't use many words, but Emily acknowledged in her tone the fear she had heard before in nightmarish nights. Jason replied that he was just nervous on stage, that she needed to take a deep breath, trust him, let her body relax. He spoke of special stretches, of trusting the teacher, of not moving too much so as not to ruin the posture. After that, there was an eerie silence. The music was turned off completely. What remained were small, dry sounds, the rustling of the fabric of the tights, the creaking of the wooden floor under the weight of the body's changing position. Emily didn't see what was happening, but every noise seemed like proof. Every pause, longer than usual, added to the sense of pent-up horror. His head began to spin in questions. Why did he need lower light? Why only a few girls? Why so much secrecy? What exactly was happening to her daughter a few feet away? Emily's legs looked like they were made of rubber. She leaned her head against the wall for a moment, afraid of fainting. The air seemed trapped in his chest, his breath short and fast. He felt a cold sweat run down his back. A part of her wanted to scream, to break down the door, to tear Lily out of there at that very second, without thinking about recording, about evidence, about anything. Another part insisted that a few more seconds of listening could be decisive in showing everyone what he said and did when he was protected by silence. Inside the room, Jason continued to speak in a low tone, encouraging the girls to trust, saying that they were special, that they were there because he saw something different in them. Emily closed her eyes tightly, trying to cling to the inner voice that told her she was doing the right thing. With each sentence, he felt as if the ground was opening up under his feet. It was as if the whole maternal instinct, which had previously seemed exaggerated in the eyes of others, was now being confirmed, point by point. In the midst of this state, her mental narration repeated itself endlessly. Why didn't I see this before? Why didn't I hear the first time she shook? How many times has this happened? How many children have passed through this room without anyone suspecting anything? The questions were a whirlwind, but along with the guilt came a strange force, a kind of silent fury that began to take over the chest. She was no longer just a suspicious mother. She was a mother at war. At one point, Jason's voice told Lily to stop shaking and take a deep breath. This phrase, in particular, cut any thread of hesitation that might still exist in Emily. It was as if he was complaining about the girl's fear reaction, trying to normalize what was happening inside. She clearly felt something break inside. The line that held the urge to invade the room simply broke. Emily stepped back slightly from the wall, took her first deep breath in many minutes, and brought her hand to the door handle of the Hall of Mirrors, which was a few steps away. It was no longer possible to stand there, listening. The whole body trembled, but the gesture came from a place of absolute decision. Each memory of Lily's tremors, the bruise on her thigh, the nightmares, the lost look at the dinner table came together in a single impulse. Get her daughter out of there, no matter what the cost. He approached the door with footsteps that seemed to echo in his own heart. Each step was accompanied by a quick thought. How I was going to hold Lily, how I was going to keep him from getting closer, how I was going to call the police, how I was going to talk to other mothers, how I was going to use that recording. The head was working at full speed, but the body seemed to be in slow motion. When her fingers finally touched the cold metal doorknob, she felt her knuckles hurt from squeezing. For a moment, he hesitated. He closed his eyes and silently said a quick prayer. She asked for strength, she asked for clarity, she asked for protection for her daughter. She also asked that, if she was wrong, she could deal with the shame of having suspected, but that, if she was right, she would have enough courage to go all the way. The phrase that popped into his mind was straightforward and simple. If I don't open this door now, I'll carry this guilt forever. There was no turning back. Emily felt her heart beat so hard it seemed to make her chest flutter. The breath became short, but firm. He pressed the handle and turned, pushing the door with a decisive, almost abrupt movement. The music, which was previously off, had no way to drown out what she would see. For a few seconds, the image before her eyes took a long time to form completely, as if her brain didn't want to accept it. When the vision adjusted, the scene that drew in front of her was enough to justify every sleepless night, every trembling, every tightness in her chest, and every, "Maybe I'm exaggerating," she had repeated to herself. The Hall of Mirrors, which on other days seemed large and bright, had the lights lower than usual, creating distorted shadows on the walls. The reflection in the mirror multiplied everything, as if there were several copies of the same disturbing image. Jason was very close to Lily and two other girls. The three of them were lined up in front of the mirror, with their shoulders tense, their feet slightly apart, their hands not knowing where to lean. The expressions were not of physical effort or concentration on a choreography. They were paralyzed. The eyes seemed lost, haunted, as if they were not really there. Jason's hands were positioned in places that went far beyond what was necessary to correct a dance step. He stood behind Lily, his body leaning forward, his hands on her body in an area no teacher should touch. His face, seen in profile, showed a mixture of concentration and something Emily couldn't name, but which made her stomach turn inside out. There was no sign of technique, only of invasion. Lily's chin trembled intensely, almost as her mother had seen at home, but now, there, the tremor seemed even more marked, as if her whole body was begging to get out of that situation. The girl's eyes were filled with suppressed, unshed tears, as if she had learned to hold them so as not to be scolded for crying. When the door opened and Emily entered, Lily's gaze, which had hitherto been glued to the floor, rose slowly and found her. Jason, noticing Emily's presence, quickly spread his hands away, as if he had been burned. His body jumped back a little, and in a matter of seconds, he tried to compose a smile, forced, hard, that didn't reach his eyes. He said something about adjusting his posture, about an important detail of the choreography for the presentation, but his voice came out louder than necessary, almost trembling. Emily felt such a shock that for a few seconds the words just wouldn't come. It was as if time had stopped, as if the sound had been sucked out of the room, leaving only the image of the teacher moving his hands away, of the paralyzed girls, of the mirror reflecting everything. Her brain struggled to process what she saw, but her heart had already understood, and it was in pieces. The sight of her daughter with her body tense, her chin trembling, her eyes wet but contained, was what finally made her move. Without thinking further, Emily ran over to Lily, crossing the room in a few long strides. He got close to his daughter, pulled her to him with a strong hug, almost desperate, as if he wanted to protect her from everything that was there. He positioned his own body in front of Jason, like a shield, placing the girl behind him, so that he could no longer touch her or even see her properly. Lily, when she felt her mother's touch, collapsed. The body that had previously been rigid surrendered to the embrace, her arms wrapping around Emily's waist tightly, her fingers digging into the fabric of her blouse. A sob, hitherto trapped, escaped the girl's throat. Emily felt her daughter's chest tremble against hers, and this confirmed once again that there was no scene of advanced technique or innocent correction here. There was fear. There was abuse of trust. There was something she never imagined witnessing so closely. Jason was still trying to compose himself. He said with a nervous laugh that Emily had arrived before the agreed time, that she was disturbing an important moment of preparation for the presentation, that the girls needed to concentrate without interference. He tried to make it seem like her entry was an inconvenience, not a salvation, but his expression betrayed him. The sweat on his forehead, the restless look, the way his hands still trembled slightly when adjusting his own shirt, gave away that he was not just surprised. I was afraid I had been caught. Emily, still not fully trusting her own voice, took a deep breath, held Lily firmly behind her, and felt the cell phone inside her pocket, still recording everything. The presence of that device, now, gave him a kind of extra courage. It wasn't just what she saw, it was what he had ordered to do, what he had said the secrets demanded. All of this could come out of that room, finally. She looked up and fixed her eyes on his. At that moment, she no longer saw herself as the mother who feared being called exaggerated. He saw himself as the only barrier between this man and all the children he considered special. He hadn't called anyone yet. He hadn't talked to the police. He hadn't addressed the other mothers yet. But there, in front of the mirror, with Lily clinging to her blouse, she knew that the scene she had just seen could never be erased. Meanwhile, the other two girls remained still, as if they were not sure what to do. They looked at Emily and Jason, confused, their evident fear reflected in their drooping eyes and shoulders. It was as if no one had ever told them that they could say no, that they could get out of a situation like this, that they had no obligation to please or obey an adult when their body screamed otherwise. Emily felt an even greater weight when she realized this. It wasn't just about Lily, it was about all the little ones that were there. The Hall of Mirrors, once a dream place, now revealed itself as a stage of distorted truth, hidden behind low lights, loud music, and praise for special girls. If you are here, it is because this story deserves to be heard until the end. What follows will show how a mother, even trembling inside, found the strength to face that man head-on and expose the truth he tried to hide behind a polite smile. Don't leave until you see how far Emily's courage was able to go and what happened to Jason when his mask finally fell off. Emily took a deep breath, trying to gather her strength to organize the words. Still with Lily hugging his waist, he turned slightly to face Jason, not giving him the pleasure of watching her retreat. The voice came out firm, though the hands still trembled. She asked bluntly why he had his hands on those parts of the girls' bodies and why the light was so low, if that was really necessary for a simple posture correction. She also wanted to know why he asked for secrecy, why he insisted so much that the children not tell their parents what happened at the end of class, and why he demanded that everyone turn off their cell phones exactly at that special moment. Jason tried to react quickly. He put a strange smile on his face, tried to laugh at the situation as if it was all a big misunderstanding. He said that Emily did not understand dance, that it was a professional environment, that this type of correction required more intense physical contact, that parents do not usually understand the artistic process, and that therefore he preferred that the children did not comment on details so as not to generate unnecessary alarm. As he spoke, he took small steps back, as if he were instinctively looking for a way out, both physical and speech. I looked at the girls, trying to get some kind of confirmation from them, but I couldn't find any. Their eyes were still scared, downcast, lost. Lily, clinging to her mother, pressed her fingers even tighter on Emily's blouse, as if she was afraid that at any moment someone would try to take her out of there again. Emily didn't back down. Feeling his heart pounding, he reached into his pocket and pulled out his cell phone. The recording icon was still on. Calmly, without screaming, just firmly, she showed the device to Jason and said that everything he had told the girls to do that day, from asking them to turn off their cell phones to talking about secrets and special stretches, was recorded there. The teacher's face changed. The forced smile gradually disappeared, giving way to a hard, tense expression. For a few seconds, he didn't seem to know what to say. She tried even so to justify herself, stating that any sentence could be misinterpreted, that she was misunderstanding everything, that it could end his career for no real reason. But the tone of voice was no longer so convincing. Fear began to appear in the cracks. Emily felt the anger rise along with the sense of justice. It wasn't just his words, but what she had seen with her own eyes. The teacher's body glued to his daughter's, his hands where they shouldn't be, Lily's trembling, the imposed silence. All of this formed, together with the audio, an image that no one could ignore. Lily, still glued to her mother, held her blouse so tightly that her fingers began to become marked white with tension. Emily realized how much the girl depended at that moment on her not going back, not being convinced by beautiful explanations. She understood clearly that she was not just defending her own daughter, he was there being a spokesperson for all the children who might never have been able to speak. Jason tried to get a little closer, perhaps in an attempt to regain control, but Emily stepped forward, preventing any approach. Her gaze did not waver. She warned him in a firm tone that she would not allow him to touch Lily or any other girl again until everything was cleared up. He said he would call the principal, other mothers, and, if necessary, the police. He reacted by saying that she was exaggerating, that it could destroy the studio, that the girls needed him, that the whole community trusted his work. She mentioned that many mothers had already left children there for years without ever complaining about anything. He tried to throw the weight of responsibility on Emily's shoulders, making it look like she was creating a baseless scandal. But this time the tactic didn't work. Emily had already gone beyond the point of letting herself be controlled by the opinions of others. The memory of the sleepless nights, the tremors, the purples, the fragile excuses, the "Mom, please don't make me go back there," now served as fuel. She knew she wasn't crazy, that she wasn't making anything up. And he also knew that if he was silent at that moment, no one else would speak. With a steady hand, he took Lily by the hand and said that they were going to get out of there now. She asked the other two girls to approach her in a voice that mixed sweetness and urgency. The girls, still frightened, took a few steps towards Emily, as if that strong maternal figure was, at that moment, the only safe haven. Jason started to speak louder, saying that he hadn't finished class, that it was absurd, that he needed the girls to get back into the position. His voice, however, no longer had the same authority. The mood in the room had changed completely. The man who had previously commanded the steps now seemed cornered. Emily turned toward the door and shouted out the name of an employee she knew was at the front desk. The voice echoed through the hallway. He asked her to come to the room immediately and to call the owner of the school as well. The tone of his voice left no room for doubt. There was a serious problem there, and it wasn't just an over-the-top mother making drama. With the call, the noise began to grow. Footsteps in the hallway, voices approaching. Other mothers, who were arriving for the next class, began to stop at the door, looking inside strangely, not yet understanding what was happening. They saw Jason pale. They saw Lily crying and clinging to her mother. They saw Emily with her cell phone in her hand, her gaze steady, her breathing quick. When one of the employees walked in, Emily explained in a few words that she needed help and that something very serious was going on in the extra workouts with Jason. He said that he had recordings, that he had seen inappropriate touching, that the children were afraid. The girls, hearing Lily's mother say all that out loud, began to confirm with small gestures, with embarrassed looks, with short phrases. "I don't like it when he turns off the lights. I get scared when he tells me not to tell anyone." Gradually, the blind trust that the community had in the teacher began to crack. The mothers at the door took steps inside, calling out their daughters' names, looking at Jason as if they were seeing him for the first time. The school lady, when called, appeared with a confused expression, but as Emily, still trembling, repeated what she had seen and heard, her countenance changed from incredulity to shock. Emily asked them to call the police. He no longer wanted that situation to be treated as an internal misunderstanding. He knew that at that point it was necessary for someone from outside, with authority, to come and do what had to be done. The employee, nervous but realizing the severity, ran to the reception and took the phone. Meanwhile, Emily hugged Lily, who was crying silently, now without having to hold back her tears. The girl leaned her face against her mother's chest, looking for the security that had been lacking in those afternoons of extra training. The other girls approached their own mothers, who hugged them tightly, as if they wanted to make up in a single gesture all the times they had trusted too much without looking closely. Jason still tried to argue, saying that calling the police was an exaggeration, that everything could be solved there, that it was enough to talk, but his words no longer found ground. The presence of so many witnesses, the audio recording, the girl's account and Emily's unwavering posture formed a barrier that he could not cross. From then on, what would come next would be the entry of agents, formal questions, separation of the teacher from the children, handcuffs, testimonies and the weight of the law falling on those who thought they were untouchable behind a smile and a title of dear teacher. And in the process, Emily would go from being just the mother she distrusted in silence to becoming, in everyone's eyes, the woman who had the courage to open the door that no one else wanted to face. This story is not for everyone. If you have come this far, it is because you want to know the truth behind every gesture, every silence, every tremor that this girl has experienced. What happened after the police arrived, how the community reacted, how Emily and Lily began a difficult but necessary path of recovery and justice is yet to be told. Before we continue, help bring real stories to those who really care about protection and truth. If you want to be part of this mission, don't forget to like this video, subscribe to the channel and activate the bell to accompany each chapter of this journey of maternal courage. In the days following Jason's arrest, Emily and Lily's lives seemed to enter one of those movies where everything happens too fast, but at the same time, every minute weighs a ton. The first news began discreetly. A note on a Dallas portal, another in a small newspaper in Plano, talking about a dance teacher accused of inappropriate conduct with underage students. Soon after, local stations began to show the facade of the Miller Dance Studio. The glass door closed, the sign with the name still hanging, the quiet street around it contrasting with the gravity of what had happened inside. Emily found herself watching these reports with a heavy heart, even when she tried to avoid it. It was strange to recognize in the background of the images the place where he had parked his car so many times, where he had seen Lily enter excitedly, and now to hear words like accusation, victim, trauma. investigation. Over time, new testimonies began to emerge. In an evening report, a mother, her face partially blurred to preserve her identity, said that her eldest son had already commented that he didn't like the way Jason closed the door in the smaller classes, but she never imagined something so serious. In another excerpt, a teenager, now 15 years old, mentioned that when she was 10, she had also gone through special training after hours, but that she never had the courage to tell it. Each new report seemed to put an extra brick in the wall of guilt and courage that Emily carried inside her. Guilt for not having realized before, for having trusted like everyone else, and courage for having been, perhaps, the first to break the silence. Jason was formally charged, and hearings began to be scheduled. His name appeared in official documents, in articles with cold titles, full of legal terms that Emily had difficulty fully understanding, but the essential was clear. He was no longer the charismatic and beloved dance teacher. He was a man who was criminally responsible for what he had done to defenseless children. The community member of Plano, who had previously embraced him, was now forced to face that danger can hide under the friendliest smile. Meanwhile, life inside Emily's house also needed to go on. Lily, who used to be counting down the days to her next dance class, was now afraid to even pass by the street where the studio was. The first time they had to cross that region by chance on the way to the supermarket, the girl lowered her head, held her mother's hand firmly, and said she didn't want to look. Emily walked around another street, even if it meant a few more minutes in traffic, and understood that from then on, small adaptations would be part of the cure. Following instructions from the police and child protection professionals, Emily took Lily to weekly sessions with a child therapist. The clinic was in a discreet building, with a simple waiting room, a bookshelf full of books and toys, and pictures with colorful drawings on the walls. The therapist, a calm-spoken woman with a welcoming look, created a space where Lily could play with dolls, draw, and little by little vent the fear, shame, and confusion she felt. At first, the girl hardly spoke. She kept stirring clay, making balls, and kneading everything again as if she were trying to give shape to what lived inside her. As the weeks passed, she began to say small, loose phrases, that she didn't like the dim light in the dance room, that she felt like crying when Jason got too close, that she felt wrong for shaking so much and for not being able to talk to her mother before. For Emily, hearing these accounts, even filtered through the therapist's words, was like reliving the day she opened that door. In many moments, he left the sessions with teary eyes, fighting against the urge to cry in front of Lily so as not to overwhelm her. Inside the house at night, when the girl slept, the mother found herself remembering all the signs that now seemed so clear. The trembling when she heard the message on her cell phone, the looser clothes, the insistent requests to arrive early, the inexplicable silences. I felt a cutting guilt for not having put the pieces together sooner, for having tried to explain so much of it as nervousness, shyness, phase. At the same time, a part of her knew that if she had gone over all of this, if she had accepted the apology, nothing would have changed. The fact that she decided to listen to her own intuition, even against the opinion of other mothers, even against the comfort of appearances, had saved her daughter and opened space for other children to be protected as well. That thought was a thread of hope to which he clung when guilt threatened to choke. There were days when Emily woke up feeling stronger, able to face the world, accompany Lily to school, prepare breakfast, go to work, and return home without feeling the weight of history in every corner. On other days, any news about the case, any distracted comment from a colleague about these horrible things we see on TV, made his stomach churn. It was a process, she understood, of slow healing. There was no button to delete everything. There was, yes, the chance to build something new from the truth. The most difficult thing, perhaps, was to deal with mixed feelings. Emily was proud that she had the courage to confront Jason, to walk into the room, to raise her voice. She was relieved to know that he would no longer have access to other children. But he also carried a deep sadness that Lily had lost her innocence so soon, that hall of mirrors, which should be a place of dream and art, had become a scene of fear. Many nights she would sit by her daughter's bedside, watching her sleep, and think about how many mothers in the world might be, at that very moment, suspecting something and being called exaggerated. As the months went by, the routine of therapy sessions helped Lily find a little more peace. The girl learned to name what she felt, to say that it was not her fault, that trembling was not a sign of weakness, but of a body that tried to warn that something was wrong. Emily, in turn, learned to listen without interrupting, to welcome without pressuring, to ask questions carefully. The house, which for a while seemed full of ghosts, went back to having shy laughter, small gestures of affection, conversations about simple things, such as a new design or the pancake recipe that worked. Seeing the dimension that the story took, with reports, comments, and other families talking, Emily began to understand that what happened between those four walls did not only concern her and Lily. That was part of a larger, darker reality, in which many children suffer in silence and many mothers doubt their own instinct. The difference, in their case, is that a tremor was taken seriously, and this perception, painful but real, gave a new meaning to the pain they were going through. She began to think that if their story could reach other women, perhaps some mother, somewhere listening or watching, could remember a strange look from her son, an insistent request from her daughter not to return to a place, and would have the courage to investigate. The idea of transforming the experience into an alert, into a lesson, into empowerment, began to grow. It did not erase the trauma, but gave it a broader meaning. It was like saying to herself and to others, "You're not crazy. Your heart feels what your eyes sometimes can't see." As the months passed, Lily began to smile more easily again. It wasn't the same inattentive smile as before. Now there was something more mature in the look, a mixture of delicacy and strength that Emily didn't know if it hurt or was proud of. The girl didn't want to know about dancing for a long time. When he saw a presentation on television, he changed the channel or lowered the volume. Instead, he began to take an interest in drawing. At the neighborhood public school, an art teacher noticed her talent and began to encourage her, lending her colored pencils, showing simple techniques, inviting her to participate in a small drawing club in the library. Emily was relieved to see that, in this environment, she could be calmer. The art room was open, bright, with large windows and shared desks. There were no closed doors, low light, loud music covering sounds. The conversations Lily brought home now talked about characters she invented on paper, colorful landscapes, ideas for a mural at school. The dance had left a void, but the drawing appeared as a less threatening form of expression, a place where her daughter could show herself again to the world, safely. At the same time, Emily felt that she could not just stay in the private sphere. He began attending meetings of the PTA, the school's parent-teacher association. At first, I went just to listen, shy, afraid of looking like that mother who exaggerates. But one night at one of these meetings, after a comment about school safety, someone briefly mentioned the case of Plano's dance teacher. Silence fell in the room, heavy, and Emily felt that she could no longer remain silent. With his heart racing, he asked for the floor. She said, without going into explicit details, that she was the mother of one of the girls involved, that she was the one who decided to enter the room, record the evidence, call the police. He talked about the trembling in Lily's hands, about the requests to arrive early, about how everyone considered Jason almost family. He said that often the most important signs are what the most hurried adults call drama, tantrum, or freshness. When she heard her own voice echoing through the room, she felt fear and relief at the same time. After that first time, Emily was invited to speak at community meetings, small conversation circles promoted by neighborhood churches, mothers' groups, and local organizations. She didn't see herself as a speaker, she didn't have rehearsed speeches, but she had a lived truth that no one could take away. At each meeting, he repeated a phrase that became almost a motto: "If your heart tightens, don't ignore it." He told how seeing his daughter tremble was the first warning, how explaining that tremor as nervous almost cost him dearly, and how, in the end, deciding to listen to his own heart made all the difference. This phrase began to circulate. Some mothers wrote them down in notebooks, others repeated them in informal conversations at the school door or in the supermarket parking lot. "If my heart tightens, I won't ignore it," they said to each other, like a silent pact of protection. The legacy of Emily and Lily's story became precisely this invitation: to trust the inner voice more than the good reputation of any adult, no matter how beloved he is in the neighborhood. A year after the events at Miller Dance Studio, life seemed to have found a new balance. Jason was awaiting trial, and news about the case still appeared from time to time, especially when there was official news. Emily followed everything closely, wanting to make sure that justice would really be done. Lily, on the other hand, still went to therapy, although less frequently, and was already able to talk about the subject without the same weight as before, as if words helped to take the fear out of the dark and put it under the light. 2 years later, the sense of direct threat had subsided. The teacher had been convicted, and this brought concrete relief. It was not just an impression that justice was at work. It was a fact. He could no longer approach children. Some victims attended the hearings, others chose not to go, but the recognition that they were not alone was an important step. For Emily, knowing that Lily's voice, along with her own courage, had contributed to this condemnation, gave the pain a contour of victory. Lily, now a little older, kept her distance from any activity that reminded her of the studio, but she had found in the drawings a way to reconstruct her own body and her own history. In one of his school assignments, he drew a girl with big eyes holding a woman's hand in front of a half-open door, with bright light outside and shadow inside. When the teacher asked what that scene meant, Lily replied that it was the moment when the light came in. Emily, when she saw the drawing, felt her eyes water. He needed no further explanation. In the neighborhood, the case was still used as a warning. Whenever there was a question about a certain adult who had access to children, someone remembered what happened in Plano and said that it was better to check, ask, follow closely. Fear didn't take over everything, but it brought a kind of healthy vigilance. The community has learned the hard way that you can't give a child to someone just because everyone says they're trustworthy. The story of Emily and Lily over time stopped being just about a guilty dance teacher and became a story about instinct, courage, and protection. The daughter, even though she had experienced something that no child should face, showed a silent strength that inspired her mother. Emily, in turn, took on the role of a woman who did not remain silent, who did not accept easy explanations, who transformed her own fear into a concrete attitude. Where before there was only a worried mother, many have come to see an everyday heroine, one of those who do not wear a cape, but carry in their hands the power to change destinies. On a calm Sunday morning, a few years after all, Emily sat at the kitchen table, a mug of coffee in her hands, staring out the window at the backyard. Lily, now taller, with her hair still tied in a ponytail, drew sitting on the grass, with the soft sun beating down on her hair and her face lighter. Observing that scene, the mother felt that, despite all the marks, there was a possible peace there. It wasn't like nothing happened. It was as if, even after everything, life had found a way to flourish again. The end of this story begins precisely with the memory of Lily trembling in the dance room. That tremor, which had previously been seen as nervous, embarrassed, or shy, turned out to be the sign that changed everything forever in that family's life. Emily, now more aware of her own path, returns to this image many times. She finds herself at the door of the studio, her heart racing, her mind full of doubts, not sure if she was exaggerating or if she was about to save her daughter from something much worse. The image of Lily, small, with cold hands and a frightened look, mixes with that of the girl drawing quietly in the backyard a few years later. It is as if two versions of the same child occupied the mother's heart, the fragile Lily and the rebuilding Lily. Sitting at the kitchen table on a random Sunday morning, Emily watches her daughter through the window and feels a gratitude that is difficult to explain. He remembers how hard it was to accept that this man, so polite, so beloved in the neighborhood, could be doing something so cruel behind a closed door. He remembers the feeling of going against everyone when he decided to distrust the perfect teacher. A shiver runs through her spine every time she thinks about how everything could have been different if she had accepted the apology, if she had let the fear of other people's opinions be stronger than her instinct. At the same time, a gentle warmth fills his chest when he thinks of the moment when he finally turned the doorknob and chose to see the truth with his own eyes. Lily's trembling hands, the hidden bruises, the sleepless nights when the girl moved in bed, mumbling nonsense, all this still visits Emily's mind. But now these memories are accompanied by other images. The therapist's voice saying that the child is reacting well, that talking about fear helps to reduce the weight he has inside. Lily's shy smile when showing a new drawing, the tight hug that the two give each other after difficult conversations. The truth came out in time, and with care, love and accompaniment, fear lost space, giving way to a trust built day after day. When Emily remembers the moment she saw the handcuffs on Jason's wrists next to the police car parked in front of the Miller dance studio, her body still reacts with a mixture of nausea and relief. Seeing that man being taken away, hearing the voice of arrest, feeling the murmur of the other mothers around, all this showed in a concrete way that she was not crazy, that she had not exaggerated. There, in front of everyone, it was clear that her courage had saved not only Lily, but also many other children who may never have had the courage to speak. The eyes of other mothers, mixing guilt for not having seen it before and deep gratitude for someone having broken the silence, are memories that Emily carries as a constant reminder that one attitude can change the fate of several little ones. She understands today that she cannot change the past. She cannot erase what happened inside that hall of mirrors, nor give her daughter back the full innocence she had before. But you can use this pain as a warning tool. In every meeting at school, in every conversation in the parking lot, in every meeting of mothers who meet to talk about children, Emily reaffirms that reputation is not a shield, that no profession, no matter how respected, is above the safety of a child. She reminds everyone that trusting blindly can be dangerous, and that distrusting is not a lack of faith in the other, but beware of those who are more fragile. For those who listen to this story until the end, the image that remains is that of a mother who almost went crazy with worry, who had nights when she thought she was seeing things where there was nothing, but who, in the end, chose to believe in her own heart. While many said she was exaggerating, that it was drama, that in our community these things don't happen, Emily decided that she would rather be embarrassed than risk being silent and seeing her daughter suffer even more. He saw the girl trembling, and instead of telling her to stop, saying that it was freshness, he decided that it was a cry for help. She entered the room, faced the teacher, called for help, without fear of seeming too harsh or creating problems. Today, she knows that the path is not yet completely flat. There are still nights when Lily has strange dreams. There are still times when a more abrupt touch, a closed environment, a smell that refers to the studio, brings out a discomfort that is difficult to explain. He also knows that the relationship between the two has deepened. The trust they built after all this has a different basis, made of truth, of listening, of promises fulfilled. Lily knows that if she says something is wrong, her mother will believe it. Emily knows that if she feels her heart tighten again, she won't be silent. At the bottom of this story, there is a silent invitation to all women who watch or listen to this story, especially those who have felt a tightness in their chest when looking at their own daughter and realizing that something seemed different without knowing exactly what. Perhaps they saw a tremor, a look avoided, an insistent request not to return to a place that, in theory, was safe. May this story serve as a reminder that a single sign can be the beginning of a truth that needs to be discovered. May each mother feel encouraged to ask one more time, to observe a little more, not to be satisfied with vague answers when the heart insists on saying that something is not right. Because in the end, it is this step of courage that can protect an entire life. It is the decision to turn the handle, to enter the room, to face discomfort that separates silent fear from justice that finally arrives. If you've come this far, it's because this story touched some part of your heart, perhaps awakening memories, perhaps lighting alerts, perhaps just reinforcing what you already knew. Mother's instinct is not an exaggeration, it's a compass, and no outside voice should be louder than it. So before leaving, remember to take this certainty with you, and if you feel that this message can help other people, share it, talk about it, stay tuned for the stories that are yet to come. There are many other mothers and daughters who need to be heard.